Hey guys, it's Neon for CLOWNFISH TV. Just wanted to post an update on Solo, a Star Wars story, and all the drama surrounding the box office drop-off. Scott Mendelson from Forbes just posted an article this morning that Solo dropped 65%. It only made $29 million this weekend, and it's only up to $149 million cumulative total. That's really not good. I mean, we're talking like a wrinkle in time money. Like, that is not good. So here's the article, and he's basically talking about, going into the same old thing you've heard. Solo, a Star Wars story, earned $29.3 million in its second Friday through Sunday weekend of release. That's a grim 65.2 drop from its somewhat underwhelming $84.4 million Friday through Sunday debut last weekend, a clear sign the film isn't going to score any kind of post-opening revival. The week's worth of what went wrong media coverage probably didn't help, but if the folks wanted to see the mostly well-reviewed Solo, they would have done so. And the funny thing about this is you go out to Rotten Tomatoes, actually Solo is kind of picking up momentum with the audience scores as people finally come around to seeing it. It is going up. It's out of the green puke bucket area, but not enough to save it. Financially, it's just not doing well. Absent no major newbies this weekend, it would have still been the big movie of choice had general audiences had the itch. And that's the thing too. Like, a lot has been said about the fan boycott, and I do believe that has played some part in it, but really for such a loss as this, like, general audiences had to just not care about this movie. And that's really what I'm getting out of this, is like general audiences just didn't care about Solo, whether they didn't know about it, they weren't interested, or they just have better things to do with their life than go see another Star Wars movie. The general audiences, the families, did not care about Solo at all. A 65% drop after an already underwhelming weekend is a sign of a presumably quick theatrical demise. Now he kind of goes on the defensive here. He's talking about The Last Jedi, and how The Last Jedi had a massive second week drop-off. It did, but we're talking like much larger numbers compared to Solo. No, this isn't remotely like the situation faced by The Last Jedi. That sequel was coming off much bigger opening weekend numbers, down 67% from a $220 million debut weekend, and had both a disadvantage of Christmas Eve falling on a Sunday and the advantage of Christmas Day falling on its second Monday, and the disadvantage of people absolutely freaking hating the movie. My words, not his. So Christmas Day was then followed by a 2-week kids are out of school holiday season that saw Last Jedi's second batch of weekdays outgross the first batch. Moreover, Last Jedi has to contend with a surprisingly robust Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, and The Greatest Showman. That is true. There were, frankly, much better movies that came out right after The Last Jedi, and I really do think that Jumanji did a lot of damage because it took the family audiences, and I enjoyed Jumanji a lot more than I enjoyed The Last Jedi. Walt Disney didn't have another big release, opening just 3 weeks after The Last Jedi, but Incredibles 2 will drop in 2 weeks and is arguably a bigger priority for the Mouse House. That, I believe, is true. I think Incredibles 2 is where all the marketing dollars went. Solo kind of got shortchanged in the marketing department. Just my opinion, compared to other Star Wars movies, there just wasn't the big push. Actually, it's kind of weird because they pushed really hard for A Wrinkle in Time. That did not perform well at the box office, but I mean, you could see marketing dollars being spent on The Wrinkle in Time. And Incredibles 2, they're pushing that like crazy. They were promoting Incredibles 2 before Solo. Going back to our previous video, I really get the feeling that Disney just kind of chalked this one up to being a loss, threw their hands up in the air, and they're like, yeah, we're not, this movie's gonna tank. We're not spending any more money on marketing this movie. And again, something else we talked about too, where Pirates of the Caribbean can actually underperform in the U.S. and it makes up the money overseas. Star Wars does not recoup any money overseas for the most part. Star Wars has been a domestic slanted franchise. When they're saying overseas, when Scott Mendelson's saying overseas, I think he's really talking about China. Pirates of the Caribbean and Transformers and a couple other franchises that have sort of run out of steam in the U.S. have actually picked up momentum overseas. People are like, how come they keep making Pirates of the Caribbean movies? How come they keep making Transformers movies? They're not that good, and they keep making these movies. And the reason they do it is for Chinese audiences. But Chinese audiences hate Star Wars. It doesn't matter what you call it, they hate it. So Solo has just earned over $30 million overseas this weekend, dropping 60% from its foreign debut last weekend. It's only had $115 million overseas total and a current $148 million domestic total So Solo, a Star Wars story, has only earned $264 million worldwide in just under 2 weeks of global release. That's not good considering The Last Jedi made that much in a weekend. Yeah, it's not good. They're actually making comparisons now. I'm really surprised because Mendelson usually is, a lot of fans consider him a Star Wars and Lucasfilm apologist. He is comparing the performance of Solo to X-Men: The Last Stand, yeah, which is not a good movie to compare this to. It's the best case scenario is maybe Suicide Squad. It might hit 216-ish million. I don't even think it's going to hit that. I think next weekend we have some big movies opening, and it's game over for Solo. So he is conceding, yes, without question, is going to be the lowest grossing live action theatrical Star Wars movie of all time in America when adjusted for inflation. If it can't at least hit 210 million, it'll end up lower in raw grosses than the 209 million initial theatrical release of The Empire Strikes Back. He's making comparisons that 209 million is the adjusted for inflation gross of Julia Roberts' Notting Hill, which opened on Memorial Day weekend against the second week of The Phantom Menace. Even the special editions of Star Wars made more money than Solo. Now, the good news, now it depends on who you ask. The good news is this will hopefully offer a lesson in playing it safe with the Star Wars franchise. Marvel had their one flop with Incredible Hulk. Pixar had their first two whiffs with a comparatively conventional Good Dinosaur and Cars 3. Disney will be fine as they're drowning in MCU money with Incredibles 2 and Ant-Man the Wasp on the way. I might argue that they might consider Mary Poppins Returns to be a more important 2018 release, which explains why they didn't move Solo to the year-end slot. That's possible. I mean, I think Solo honestly may have done better if they had, moved it to December. People were kind of used to Star Wars movies coming out in December now. But then the last paragraph, he has to make sure he gets in this because apparently there's a lot of fighting between Mendelson and Star Wars fans who are angry about the direction of the franchise and calling for the firing of Kathleen Kennedy. Scott Mendelson says, nonetheless, Kathleen Kennedy's Lucasfilm has earned around $4.9 billion worldwide on the first 4 Star Wars movies on a budget of around $1 billion combined. Calls for her to be fired or replaced are misguided at best. Her mostly successful Star Wars movies have earned majority positive reviews and decent audience polling scores, and they're disingenuous at worst. When you make 4 movies in 3 years that earn $2 billion, $1.1 billion, $1.3 billion, and $400 million respectively, you're allowed the mulligan. We've said this before in our previous video. We do not believe that Kathleen Kennedy is going to get fired over Solo. We think that Disney actually expected this one to bomb. The real test for the Star Wars franchise is going to be Episode 9. As we said before, I think they're going to market the heck out of Episode 9. Like, you're never going to see marketing for a Star Wars movie like you've seen for Episode 9 because they're going to consider that the end of the saga films. As far as we can tell, it's going to be the end of this trilogy. There's a lot riding on this one. So they're going to really, really ramp up the marketing for Episode 9. If Episode 9 bombs, then yeah, clearly Kathleen Kennedy's tenure has been mostly fail at that point. But, I don't know how this is going to go. Solo, I mean, again, we've seen Solo. I like Solo. I actually thought it was a good movie. We do believe the fan backlash played some part into it, but it just seemed like general audiences weren't feeling it. And for Star Wars, that's not good. That's not good if general audiences aren't feeling the force. So we'll see what happens. As far as Kathleen Kennedy is concerned, we have stated many times, I honestly think she will leave after Episode 9 on her own. There's going to be a changing of the guard with Bob Iger leaving Disney. She's in her mid-60s already. I think she probably will leave. Who's going to replace her? I have absolutely no idea. I have no idea who's going to replace her. Some people have suggested they think that Kathleen Kennedy is going to become the president of the Walt Disney Company. I do not see that happening at all. Her background seems to be solely in movies. The most likely candidate that I've been hearing is Bob Chapek from, he runs the Parks and Resorts division, and he's really knocking it out of the park, and the smart money would be on Bob, but that's just me. So yeah, Solo is a complete bust, which is a bummer because we actually kind of like the movie, but there you go. So Disney, you've got a problem. You're going to have to address it. Bye.